to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, a proud member of the CLNS Media Network, with this show brought to you by Prize Picks, the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Also, for those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content out there with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Patriots Press Pass YouTube channels as well. And please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. Welcome to the 191st episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. With me, longtime friend and colleague Mick Colageo. Mick, please tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend, now that we've got your sound up and running. We're doing good. We're cooking with gas today.
Whoever thought that would be a problem in my life? Yeah, the Centennial Savvy podcast is now the Centennial Zadorov podcast. So yeah, Rink Rap is my blog, and I link to it on X, Twitter, and Facebook. And just wrote a missive on the playoffs, talking about roster architecture and the kinds of teams that win, and the daunting task ahead of the Florida Panthers, despite their spectacular start in Carolina.
Very good. Everybody check that out. Always love what Mick has to say on every subject. The playoffs are fascinating. Continues to look like the Florida Panthers are the team to beat, and have been and will be and will continue to be. And I think Carolina Hurricanes kind of learned that, getting slapped around a little bit in game one, after, the Panthers took care of the Leafs in the second round. And it's almost getting to the point, and we're going to get into Don Sweeney. That's basically what we're going to be talking about on this show today, just so everybody's buckled in and prepared. But it's getting to the point now where, like, the Panthers are kind of like wrecking franchises. Like the Panthers are almost like the Grim Reaper in the NHL, where teams are realizing the mortality, realizing their fatal flaws in their roster, and it's just destroying the spirit of some of these teams and kind of breaking them apart. They did it to the Boston Bruins after beating them in the first round a couple of years in a row. They've done it to the Maple Leafs now, beating them a couple of times. And really, I think there's a reckoning for this Leafs team after that latest loss against the Florida Panthers. And
they were
the Hurricanes are kind of the same thing. The Hurricanes keep running headlong into brick walls in the playoffs, even though they're a pretty good team year after year after year. And I guess that's a sign of a really excellent team when you're the one that is like crushing the dreams of all these other teams in the Eastern Conference on your way to get into the Stanley Cup final. And that's what seems like the Florida Panthers are doing year in and year out at this point.
They're taking, in a matter of days, they are causing management teams to go for the work that they've been doing for years, and ripping it to pieces. And right now, the Carolina Hurricanes are no doubt huddled in extra meetings to discuss extra things about what to do about playing Florida, because this is what the Panthers have been doing to the league, going back to the 22-23 playoffs. They had that horrible Stanley Cup final against Vegas that the NHL made it and wait 10 days to play. And they were never really played a game true to their identity until the series was too deep a hole. And obviously it was a formidable opponent. So I'm not saying they would have won, just saying that this is the monkey wrench team of the playoffs, and it's not a sexy pick right now. But despite their challenge, which I'm blown away, because no team since the 85 Edmonton Oilers has gone to 3 Stanley Cup finals in a row after playing out full-length NHL seasons on schedule. This is a rare feat. It's 4 decades since, and it's in a cap era. The last team to do it was declared by the NHL to be the greatest team ever assembled. I don't agree with them, but that's beside the point. It's an impressive offensive machine that did that with no salary cap, featuring young Lions, Wayne Gretzky, Mark Messier, Jari Kurri, Paul Coffey, Glenn Anderson, all entering the sweet spots of their careers. and losing to the Islanders in '83, beating them in '84, repeating against the Flyers in '85, and that is the last time a team has gone to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals without there being a glitchy interruption to the season and or shortened schedules.
I mean, that it's really interesting when you put it that way and put it in perspective that way. And it's also interesting to note that this team is nothing like that Edmonton Oilers team. You know, this is a team that does it a totally different way. There is no Wayne Gretzky on this Oilers team. They do it with a different style of play than that Oilers team did.
Much harder to sustain.
And it is. It's much more difficult to sustain what they're doing the way the Panthers play and what they bring to the table, and doing it in a salary cap era is more difficult too. Like, there's more turnover, more change, harder to keep teams together for a long period of time than it was back in those days. So like, as I said before, my hat is off to the Panthers and the way that they play.
It really highlights their uncanny ability to bring in waves of new supporting cast and to get those guys to assimilate to them, their identity. Guys I never thought would be able to play their way are playing their way. Last year was Ekman Larson. This year it's Nate Schmidt. They are just guys whose careers.
Marchand.
Yeah, I mean,
another one that's assimilated perfectly. Like, and it's become a destination spot for veterans. Like, they want to go there because of the way that team plays and how good they are, and how you're jumping on a team that's got legit and real Stanley Cup aspirations. So it's a pleasure to watch them. I know they're a rival of the Bruins. They ended their season a few times, and really, I think we're going to look, when we look back at history, we're going to look at that Panthers team as the one that really ushered in the end of that golden Bruins era with, Chara, Marchand, Bergeron, Krejci, like all those guys. They kind of were the undertakers at the end that kind of took them out.
They remind me of the '70s Flyers and the '90s Devils.
So that makes them like a hated rival of Bruins fans. But like, I can't help but admire and enjoy the way that they play and how they go about doing things. I think they're a fun team to watch. I love their style of play, and I love the way they do it. But enough about the Panthers. Let's get to the news of the week, Mick. Don Sweeney, on Tuesday, it was announced he signed a 2-year contract extension. So he's going into his last year. He's got 2 more years beyond that now. This is what Cam Neely said in a press release. Don has navigated a disappointing period for our club with conviction, purpose, and a clear vision towards the future of the Boston Bruins. He made difficult decisions around the trade deadline with the confidence they will pay dividends as we craft a path back to contention. He is continuing to follow that track with a robust and thorough search for our club's next head coach, while also preparing for the upcoming NHL draft and free agent signing period. I am confident in the plan he has followed these past few months and excited for what's to come for our team. The expectations in Boston have always been clear. It's about winning championships. And, on a lot of levels, Mick, I think this was a no-brainer to do this. You could not let Don Sweeney be a lame duck GM after you allowed a lame duck head coach and a lame duck captain to go into last year. And it really was part of the whole dumpster fire of a season that we saw with the Bruins, was allowing 2 very influential and key parts of the operation go into these last years of their contract with nothing beyond it. And I really you couldn't do that with a GM who is hugely important decisions and things to try to get done on July 1. Hugely important number 7 overall pick that they're making in the draft. Hugely important choice for a head coach and somebody to hire. And I think it goes without saying, and it's kind of self-evident, that no quality coach is going to sign on and allow himself to get hired by a GM for a job when that GM's in the last year of his contract, and there's no certainty the guy that hired you is going to be in the same position beyond that one season. Like, I don't know many coaches that would do that, aside from somebody that was kind of desperate to prove themselves in an NHL gig. And there's multiple reports out there that Rick Tocchet, part of the reason he wasn't interested in the Bruins is because of Don Sweeney's contractual situation. And, one thing that I think he was going to go to the Flyers all along, to be honest with you, just based on what I had heard and seen. But like, I don't even think the Bruins were a heavy consideration for him because of the situation with Sweeney that needed to be addressed and finalized and taken care of. And now it has been. And, there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of critics of Sweeney. He's had mistakes. He's had great triumphs. He's had a lot of things that he's done well. You can't argue with the wins and losses and where the team has been over the last 10 years and the winning percentage. And, you know, he went to the Stanley Cup final in 2019. He took the team there. He built the team that went there. He won GM of the year that year. Like, he built the team in 2023 that was an absolute wagon that should have won. And the players and the coach choked in the first round against the Panthers. I don't think that was on the GM at all. You know, I think he did all the right things there. So, you know, you look at certain instances, you can always criticize him for the 2015 draft, and we can definitely be critical of some of the first round picks in general. Urho Vakanainen, Johnny Beecher, Fabian Lysell looks like a miss. It's too early to tell on Dean Letourneau, but not an impressive first season at Boston College. So there's a very spotty record when they do draft in the first round, and they've traded away a lot of their first round picks. So that whole thing is a place you can criticize him for sure, and the Bruins organization in general over the last 10 years. But I think just based on when you look at the numbers, the accomplishments this team's had and what they've done over a 10-year period when Don Sweeney has been running the franchise, it feels like a no-brainer that he should have been extended for 2 years. It doesn't even seem like it should have the amount of criticism that it does from the fan base that like obviously likes to grouse and likes to complain. Like, he hasn't been perfect. But when you look at it on its face and all the facts and where this franchise has been over the last 10 years, it's hard to argue with the track record. Yes, they don't have a cup, but they've been one of the best teams in the East almost the entire time he's been running the franchise.
I wonder if Elias Sports Bureau has ever researched what the longest losing streak a coach has ever had under a GM who inherited that coach.
Right.
So, because I mean, if you sign with the Bruins and now Don Sweeney is replaced after the coming season,
right.
then that following season, what are you allowed? How much rope do you get?
You know you're a dead man walking. If you're a coach and you get hired by a GM and then he's gone after your first year, you know you're a dead man walking at some point. You know you're not that guy's choice. You'd have to be amazing and like the world's best coach to overcome that and stay for whatever duration of whatever contract you would sign. Like, it's just not a good situation
for
to be in.
most of 2 years. He stayed for the first year, which they barely missed, and then the second year where they were going well, and then the wheels started coming off, and it looked like they were going to miss, and that's when he decided to move Butch into the head coach position, and they rallied, and kind of never.
But you could
back.
tell that last year they had put Cassidy on the NHL staff. You kind of knew it was coming. You know what I mean? You knew it was coming.
Butch's breath on his back of his neck. You know, it's those are. That's. I mean, I kind of wonder if Jay Leach, was in a situation similar to that in this past season that just ended for the Bruins, when he was brought up back into the organization. He had been groomed in Providence, similar to Bruce Cassidy, and then left the organization for an NHL opportunity, which only strengthens his resume to be back here now. So he's more of a factor, not less. So, they did what they did, and under the circumstances that it unfolded, they elected to go with Joe Sacco as interim and not put Jay into that situation.
Yeah, no. And I can understand why that didn't happen. But just in general on Sweeney and the 2-year extension and him getting it, like, where do you fall on just your reaction to it? Did you have any issue with it when you heard that? Were you surprised by it? Did you think, okay, this makes sense? Like, what was your sort of take on the extension?
I felt like they had to go one with the other. And I do feel like the track record, I don't see how you can fire a GM who, prior to this season where the wheels came off, had averaged 50 or 51 wins per 82 played over the bulk of his, the main body of work. That's what it is. How many teams have had that kind of success? It would be crazy to walk away from it. I think Don Sweeney is one of the best I've ever seen at identifying needles in the haystack of NHL guys in this great sea of 700 players. Hampus Lindholm's another one. He wants Casey Middlestat to be the next one. I'm not
Yep.
feeling it yet, but
No.
we'll see if we get there. But yeah, you're right. Geeky's the new Mike Knuble, and so for them to take a guy whose career was meandering and really kind of could have been right out of the league after Seattle didn't qualify Geeky. This is what Don Sweeney's done, just been marvelous at doing, identifying these kinds of players. I'm troubled by the drafting and not from a work my way backwards kind of thing. What bothers me more is how little the Bruins have pulled from the Ontario Hockey League. I know
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yep.
they love their college guys, and hey, everybody's starting to follow them now because everybody's loving their college guys. I get it. It's elite hockey, and you're getting
Well, the
guys a
OHL
little.
guys are going to be college guys now, Mick, with the way that the rules are changing.
That's
A lot of those
that.
OHL
So
guys are going to be going to college.
that's true. But from a regional standpoint, just take Canada for example. There's been, I mean, this predates Don Sweeney, but the Bruins organization, which is with the fluid amateur scouting staff and brain trust, has, and this is what Don Sweeney grew into and did not completely clean out and revise. Uh, I know Peter Strelli probably made the more changes than anybody, over his time and right away. But they just had this thing where they love going over to British Columbia. They love being in the colleges. They'll go to Europe, but they stay the hell away from Ontario Hockey League, like 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 there's a COVID epidemic there or something, And I've never quite understood. Every time I've ever asked a question, the answer is always, well, we just go with the best player available when the choice comes up. I guess with 32 teams, then it's quite possible, or 21 when all this began, that that uh, that you're going to have scenarios where one of those teams is going to be an outlier in terms of how they draft because of the coincidence of the players that were on their list for that year.
Right.
And it keeps coming up that way. I have a hard time believing that's all there is to it. So,
Yeah.
there was like an 8-year gap between Michael Hutchinson and Nick Boynton. Uh, and Nick Boynton was a re-entry to the draft. So there's just it's just weird, and I don't quite get it. Matthew Poitras is an exception. I hope to see more of them because the OHL continues to pour players into the NHL in a very effective way, and and they're in a lot of times those are some pretty tough guys that have the right kind of playoff edge to them, So I don't know. I guess my questions about the draft and not as much about picking. Oh, you missed on this, you missed on. It's more about how they do it. I guess
Yeah.
I don't feel like I really get a lot of what I see. That's my only concern as far as that goes. Last year's draft, I felt like they tried to hit home runs with plastic bats. They trying to get guys who were playing in and not at regular expected levels for the next platform of success, taking them out of players with asterisks, saying we
Yep.
know that this guy was in this situation. He's not in quite in this league. He's in that one, but we really like him because now maybe they're gonna hit on some of this, and they're gonna wind up looking really good. I mean, there are some players who they've drafted recently that are playing college hockey right now that have done really well. I mean, and
Yep.
obviously Losh Mellis joined the P Bruins at the end of the season, and
Yep.
he looks like a real prospect. So, but I like Pelosi and Gronwald, and it sounds to me like they got something going now, and that there may be some. It feeds my confidence that they. I just so, but Don Sweeney's been just so thorough. He's collaborative. He respects the people that are around him, and they really, if anything, they seem so deliberate sometimes that I feel like they might miss a window when a hasty reaction is required.
Yeah, perhaps because
Be
he's
really
so
aggressive.
deliberate with what he does, or he really, measures 3 times before he cuts, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Maybe, but I do think, to your point, like there's strengths and weaknesses to every GM. There's strengths and weaknesses to every hockey coach. There's strengths and weaknesses to every player. Like there are definitely areas, and the draft is one of them where I think they need to continue to get better. I will say, Like Mason Lowry and Matt Poitras, good picks. Those are recent picks that they've made that have turned out to be guys that have played in the league, guys that will play in the league, guys that for where they took them, I think are pretty good players and good talent. I do agree with you that there's. It seems to me that they don't draft enough. I agree from the OHL, and maybe that's going to change with the way the rules changes are coming, where that's not going to be as much of a hotbed as it's been. But I continue to think Canadian-born players are an important part of having a successful NHL franchise. As much as I say that as a fan of USA hockey, of the kids that play college hockey from the US and want to see those players do well, and local guys play on the Bruins, I think every Stanley Cup champion has like 50% or more Canadian players on their roster. So you need to hit on the Canadian prospects playing Canadian junior hockey, and the OHL is the best one of those leagues. So you obviously should be hitting more and taking more picks out of that, as opposed to some of the other areas that they go to. But on the other side of the coin, like, he has the diamond in the rough thing that you talked about, like the Morgan Geekies of the world, and they find guys that are
Zaka's another one.
Zaka, Justin Brazeau was a guy they ended up getting value with in a trade that they signed off the street and turned into an NHL player. They do a lot of that, and they do it well. And that supplements the guys some of the draft picks they miss is some of the other like free agent undrafted players that they sign, and these players they get from other places. And I think Don Sweeney does a very good job at the deadlines. On July 1 with free agency, at the trade deadlines, I think he consistently has made moves, bold moves, big moves, small moves, whatever is needed. And I think he's been much better than Peter Chiarelli ever was at those kind of instances. Like, I remember the famous quote, Chiarelli said something like, nobody's ever won a cup at the trade deadline or whatever. He said something like that. It was basically addressing or July 1. I forget which one he was talking about. I think it was the trade deadline. But it was kind of addressing how that was never like the biggest strength of his as a GM, was those particular little snapshot moments where like there's winners and losers and knee-jerk reactions.
Must have meant the trade deadline because he got Big Z in Mark Savard on July 1.
Right. But the bottom line is Don Sweeney, I think, is very good at those, whether it was trading for Hampus Lindholm, trading for Taylor Hall. I still think Rick Nash was the right move when he made that trade.
We disagree.
Zadorov and Elias Lindholm, I think, are going to turn out to at least be, good players, if not what they thought they were going to be. And certainly they stabilized in the second half of last year. So I think some of the criticism about them and signing them should be tempered by what we saw in the second half of the year. And really, Zadorov, I think when you look at his year as a whole, had a pretty good season and was what they paid for and what they thought they were getting. But the bottom line is, I think he's shown so many areas, where he has strengths or where he does things well, that it's really hard to, the things he's criticized most for the draft, which I think is valid. And the other one is going through 3 NHL coaches that have won Jack Adams, which I think is kind of an unfair criticism when it's just lumped in that way. Look, I think the Bruins made a mistake firing Bruce Cassidy, okay? That's the one they probably would like to have back. I think they made a rash judgment about the players wanting a softer approach, and they kind of catered to the players and what they wanted instead of like keeping the coach that was actually getting results and was a really good NHL coach, has been borne out by what he did in Vegas. I think they made a mistake there. But I think that's the one where there was a mistake. I don't think it was a mistake to fire Claude Julien when they did. It was his time. Like, they made the right move bringing in Bruce Cassidy at that time. So I think that one is an unfair criticism. Firing Jim Montgomery, again, I think was the right move. Jim Montgomery was part of the choke job against the Florida Panthers in the first round that year when they had that wagon of a team. He was just as wide-eyed as some of the players. He was a problem in that series. He got outcoached. He got outcoached on the other side by the Florida Panthers. There are issues with him that continue to be with the St. Louis Blues. They allowed more 6-on-5 goals, the Blues did this year, than anybody else, and it killed them in Game 7 of the first round, just like Game 7, the Bruins collapsed under Jim Montgomery when he was the coach of that team. Like, I think they made the right move with Jim Montgomery. I know he's got a lot of backers and a lot of people that think he was railroaded here and it was an unfair thing that happened to him, but I think it was the right call. I don't think he was the right coach for this team. And I think it's really an unfair criticism of Sweeney to talk about, like, why would any coach want to come here because he's fired 3 Jack Adams winners and blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't get that. And I think maybe 1 out of the 3 was a misstep or not the right choice. But I think the other 2 were absolutely the right calls, and you can't crucify a GM for making the right call and firing the coach when he should fire the coach. Jim Montgomery did not have the team ready to play last year coming out of training camp. Like that, it wasn't obvious to everybody that he should have been fired after 20 games. Like, he might be a good coach, but he wasn't the right fit here. And I get tired of hearing people harping on this with Sweeney. You can tell it's a sensitive subject because he reacted to it, really defensively when he was asked about it. I think Tara Sullivan in that end of season press conference, and he really got his hackles up. But yeah. I really hate that criticism of Sweeney because I don't think it's valid in any way, shape, or form. NHL coaches are not NFL coaches where they stay there for 15, 20 years. They are hired to be fired. Their life expectancy is not long at any stop. There's plenty of coaches that are great examples of this, that are good hockey coaches, that after 2, 3, 4 years, you got to move on to somebody else.
Let's not forget that Don Sweeney told us that Bruce Cassidy would be back at the season-ending press conference.
Yes.
And only a few weeks later, the decision was made to replace Bruce Cassidy.
Yes.
That tells me that something fishy is going on. And you hear stuff and you find out stuff and you can't talk about it, but you know stuff and you say, you know what? I don't think he fired Bruce Cassidy.
Right.
I think somebody else did.
Right. Yeah. That he was the one, serving the walking papers, but it wasn't necessarily his unilateral decision.
Yeah, it's always your job to hold the meeting. You're the one who has to take out the trash. Yeah.
Of course. No, I agree. And that's another reason why I'm sure gets an extension, is because sometimes he has to serve out the marching orders for,
this
other people.
This whole narrative is completely unfounded in fact.
Yep.
This doesn't exist.
All right, let's take a break, Mick. Right now, that's a perfect place to take a break to talk about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Join over 10 million users and get started today. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. Instead of it's fun and super simple. Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching sports. Join over 10 million users and sign up today. On Prize Picks, you can mix and match player projections from different sports. Combine your favorite hockey players with players from baseball, basketball, esports, and so much more. Here are some picks for this week. Miro Heiskanen, more than 0.5 points. Connor McDavid, more than 2.5 shots on goal. Jake Ottinger, more than 27.5 saves. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. They also offer Venmo, MasterCard, and Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's also let people know, for those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all of this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Evan Marinofski and Conor Ryan. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel as well. And please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. All right. One criticism, Mick, that I heard yesterday, I think it was Felger, was saying that like the extending of Sweeney shows that the Bruins just want to win playoff games and just want to get to the playoffs. They don't want to win championships.
I think that's when I hit the button. Went to music.
I loved him threading that needle, like saying that, because it sounds so profound, right? But it's ridiculous. Was Sweeney trying to just get into the playoffs in 2023 when he traded first-round picks for Dmitry Orlov, Garnet Hathaway, Tyler Bertuzzi, and loaded up on an absolute wagon of a team that set the record for the best regular season in NHL history and seemed poised in Patrice Bergeron's last year to win the Stanley Cup. Were they just trying to win playoff games and get into the playoffs that year? Like, I don't know what he's talking about. Like, they've gotten to Game 7
throw
of the Stanley
facts in
Cup
front of a
final.
torch-bearing mob.
They've gotten to Game 7 in the Stanley Cup final under Don Sweeney, and they had a team in 2023 where he made all of the moves during the season to set them up to win the whole thing, and the players choked and couldn't get it done. That was not a GM that was just trying to get in the playoffs. That was a GM that was trying to win in both of those instances. So, like, the history and the facts and, like, what has actually happened over the years doesn't even add up to what he's talking about. Like, I understand it sounds good and it sounds like this profound, like, take that he's giving right there, but it's not. Like, you have to get into the playoffs to win the Stanley Cup, right? Of course you're going to try to get into the playoffs. It's ridiculous to think you're not. But they're clearly going to try to build a team that not only can get into the playoffs, but is going to win the whole thing. And I think that's been borne out in the way that they've done things.
I think that, look, I don't want to speak for you. I've always liked Mike.
I like Mike too, but I think that there's just times when if you actually, like, pick apart what he's saying, it's so flimsy. It's like, and it's not even like.
I'm saying that as a preface to this.
Yeah.
He cracks me up. I listen, so I'll laugh. It's entertaining. It's funny. But, however, I feel like him trying to put that narrative onto the Boston Bruins is a lot less realistic than me, for instance, sitting here and saying, oh, I know what happened there. Cam Neely doesn't go on their show anymore, so the gloves are off, and he'll say anything he wants just to piss him off, even as much, any opportunity they're going to take to do it just because they can. And they've become pretty skilled at saying things without getting in trouble for them. And the Boston Bruins have hey, here's another one. The last edition of the so-called hockey show on 98.5, Ty Anderson and
Beersy, Judd,
no.
Ryan Johnston.
Thank you. I'm embarrassed. I respect Ryan in a very big way, and think he's done a great job on the radio.
Yeah, he did. He did a great job play-by-play this year. I don't blame any of that season on him being his first year as a play-by-play guy. I'm sure he took some ribbing that he brought the bad luck with him, but not his fault.
No. He was just there to chronicle it.
Yes.
All right. So Ty's going off, and on management, and he's making a much more salient and legitimate argument, one I didn't happen to agree with, but much, much better than the one that Mike Felger made on 98.5 this week. Much higher level stuff from Ty. All right. Now, Ryan Johnston is saying, yeah, but what about this? And he's introducing facts and counterpoints, and I'm starting to realize, hey, Ryan can be vetoed by the Bruins in his role. Ty cannot.
Yep.
They have final say over who does their play-by-play, or they can at least say first, they can veto it and say, send me somebody else and I'll let you know. They can't do that with Ty Anderson. They don't have that power. So Ty, in a way, is more like media. Ryan's more of a rights holder. Ryan's in a precarious position because you're having a discussion here and you want to sound real. You want to sound legitimate and honest, and what you're saying has substance. And he's offering counterpoints to things that Ty was saying. And I agreed with Ryan's counterpoints that he was making. But because he was in the position that he was in, from a who pays me and why and who gets to sign off on it and all of that, it's very tough, precarious situation he was in. And I was feeling for him that day because on one hand, you want to say, wait, what about this? And he's going and he's doing it. And I'm saying, like, wow, this is pretty interesting because you wonder how far this is going to go, how much it will escalate. Because Ty was like, he wasn't letting go, And it was that was actually a very spirited and fun debate to listen to, but it felt a little nervous for Ryan because he just knowing what the situation is with his employment. So
yeah, no, I mean that's always a delicate tightrope to walk for sure. But like I just think it speaks to that it's a very nuanced sort of situation. Like I think a lot of the criticism and a lot of the like unrest or whatever you want to call it, a lot of the stuff being laid at Don Sweeney's feet, I don't think is fair. Like, I don't think it's accurate. I don't. He's been like he was picked to be GM of Team Canada for the Four Nations, and he's like on there for Team Canada. He's involved in picking their Olympic team. Like, he is an extremely well respected GM around the league, and I think other outposts in the NHL probably look at the criticism that he gets here, and like it's understandable coming off
the middle round.
It's understandable, like coming off a year that they had to a degree, right? There's going to be some angry people. There's going to be criticism. There's going to be all that. But this has been going on for years. And like, I think there's a lot of other NHL outposts that look at that and say, like, what the hell is wrong with these people? Like, what do they want? You know, and especially when it's like they're siding with coaches that I don't even think like deserve the benefit of the doubt over the player, over the GM, you know, like the stuff about like Monty, like they should have let him do whatever he wanted. They should have given him whatever he wanted. They should have tried to keep him, like all this other stuff, or criticizing management for firing him. He did not have the team ready to play last year. He had 1 foot out the door already. He choked in the playoffs twice. Like, what more did you need? And he did it again with St. Louis after he took over that team. And now he's got a 5-year contract. And I'm sure they looked at that in the playoffs and what that problem was all season, which was a problem when he coached the Bruins too. And are like, uh-oh, like, what is this something we signed on for that's going to like be an issue? And are the playoffs going to be a problem for us? Like, they were it's I don't look at that as a black mark on Bruins management that they fired Jim Montgomery. Like, I don't think he's a great NHL coach. I think they did the right thing. And I think he was a big part of like the whole mess at the start of the season. He was part of the problem. And I'll say it again. Cassidy firing him, I think was a mistake. I don't think they made the right move. I don't think they should have catered to the players. I think he should have stayed on. And I think that one is a misstep. But I give Don Sweeney credit because, like you said, I'm not sure he was fully on board with that decision. I certainly unilaterally don't think he was the one that was the biggest voice pushing for that. But I also think he learns from his mistakes. I think they learned from 2015 to a large degree. I think they probably learned from that Bruce Cassidy situation. I'm sure that they learned from this Jeremy Swayman contract situation and the way that it played out and rolled out. Certainly, I think they learned from last year, the whole organization, that you can't let your influential people go into lame duck seasons or it's going to like rip apart your entire like operation. And they didn't do that with Sweeney. So I give them all credit for learning from that lesson from the year before. But I just think in general, and people can call me a Don Sweeney honk if they want. I don't care. I'll be critical of him and I'll say the things that are not strengths of his and the things that the Bruins need to work on that they don't do well. But I think there are so many things that he's done well over the last 10 years that there was no way you couldn't extend him here. Like, I don't understand the people being up in arms when the GM with the best record over the 10 years was extended for 2 years. That's not a shocking development.
Park that where I park the fact that we now have adults in the Boston metro area who never understood what it was like to be a Boston fan before Vinatieri put that first one through the uprights.
That's true.
We now have adults that don't know that life. And so the fact that the era ended 5 years ago and that we just had this one Celtics championship last year, it's just the culture has changed and Boston market has become a bunch of spoiled brats and they expect winning all the time and you feel like you're not a real fan unless you're calling for somebody's head to roll if anything goes wrong. And so you got to build it over time. I know a lot of people calling for Claude Julien in 2010. Hey, when they didn't blow it up and they stayed with it, they wound up winning the cup. Sometimes you grow, you learn, you get better at what you do, and you work together as a team. And it takes a village, and it takes more tweaking than you thought. You thought you had everything you needed, and you find out, nope, we needed a little more. So this time, you look at the success. And there's ideas that people have that, well, no, you need to go all the way to the bottom before you can truly go to the top because you need a generational talent. Well, you can't schedule the arrival of a generational talent. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. It's not reality. So what they're left with is, Let's make the best team, the best culture, the best system, the best serve the future, serve the present that we can right now, and let's build it and then see what kind of luck we have as we go forward with it if we're doing really well. And that's been their approach. It's the professional approach. It's the scientific approach. Sometimes I find myself railing against it because I'm saying, nope, this is only going to get them close and it's going to have a ceiling to it and they're not going to win and it's going to be wasted assets and everything. I've felt that too before. But I don't.
Yep.
I think that the Boston mentality lately, in the last several years, has been that the grass is always greener on the other side, and they
Right.
don't realize how good we've had it, how unrealistic these past 25 years have been, and that what we've had these past 5 years is much more what life as a Boston fan has been over my lifetime leading up to the 21st century. That
And
this is
also,
reality.
yeah, and also the reaction that like is a ridiculous, unrealistic fan reaction that they have the benefit of experiencing, which is just everything needs to get blown up, everybody needs to get traded, everything needs to change, like everybody needs to go. Like there's a lot of that out there now that it's just not realistic and it's not happening. Like that is not the way it works, and like there are good pieces on this team. There are good bones still on this team that they can build around. There are good players that I think are never going to allow them, unless they get a bunch of injuries like they did this past season, along with serious underperformance and turmoil, to bottom out like that. Like, I don't see that happening again. And I think the 3 years now, with the year and then the 2-year extension, it gives Don Sweeney the ample time that he needs and the appropriate time that he needs to do the retooling that I think he wants to do and do it in the way that he wants, kind of similar to the Washington Capitals, where it maybe took them a couple of years to get back to where they really wanted to be this past year. I think that allows him a little more time and a little more runway to do that, instead of expecting everything to get done this summer and to be set for next year, which I think is just very unrealistic. I think the playoffs are a realistic goal for next season. I don't think the Stanley Cup is probably going to be a realistic goal for next year, nor should it be, because I think that would color some of the moves that they make and the way they approach it. But I think at the end of the day, like he's earned a few more years to right the ship, put it back in place, and mold this next generation of Bruins teams into what he wants it to be. And if at the end of the 3 years, if they're stuck in this like limbo where they're just kind of a middling NHL team, he's going to be gone, and they'll bring somebody else in, and rightfully so. But I do think, I think the extension was warranted, and I really did not have a problem with it. I thought it was the appropriate move for a lot of different reasons. And I think the Bruins will be better off for it.
The premise of his trade deadline was that they felt like the market presented them an opportunity to make deals, funnel players to teams that could help them contend for the cup, and bring back to the Bruins not only the draft capital that they had been lacking, but also
Yep.
put them in a position where they felt like they could retool their team to compete next season. Let's see if they do. So
Yep.
far, part one, I feel like they've been done very well to replay it to gather draft capital.
Yep, absolutely. And parts 2 and parts 3 are also very important. So we'll see how they do. Mick, thank you very much for joining us. Let's also thank Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prize Picks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's also let you know that for those of you subscribing to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe, or listening to this. Let me start that over again. Where are we? 43. Okay. For those of you listening to this episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast, like, and leave a review. And for those watching the show on CLNS and enjoying all this hockey talk, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe to the Bruins Rinkside YouTube channel, where you can find our show and a lot of other great Bruins content with fellow Bruins talkers like Conor Ryan and Evan Marinofski. There's also the CLNS Media Network and Patriots Press Pass YouTube channels as well. And also, please make sure to turn on your notifications so you know the instant a new Pucks with Haggs podcast video drops on the interwebs. Mick Colageo, thank you for joining us, my friend.
It's been a pleasure being on the interwebs.
It always is a big pleasure being on the interwebs and being heard on the interwebs. What's even better than that? Everybody else out there, thank you for listening. We'll see you at the rink.